All right. Well, good morning, afternoon. Well, I guess depending on where you're at. We're glad that you're part of this conversation today. We're excited to have Thom Rainer with us today, and Josh is going to introduce him in just a moment. But he's going to speak on the necessity of innovation in the church today. So we are really looking forward to this conversation today. And I am going to ask Nick Carnes if you would just take a moment and pray for us. And then as soon as he's finished praying, Kylie is going to take over from there.
Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for this great privilege and opportunity that we have to serve your kingdom, to be able to meet together.
I'm not the only one, right? I guess y'all can pray on your own.
No, he's muted.
Am I unmuted now?
Sorry.
The Lord,
Start over.
The
Lord
Lord
heard
heard
you.
your prayer. The Lord heard your prayer, brother, but not the rest of us. That's
right. Well, I thought I was unmuted, so let's do it. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity that we have to gather together. We thank you for the opportunity that we have and the privilege to serve in your kingdom through the local church. I thank you for my brothers and sisters that I get to meet with on a weekly basis, the great ideas that we get to share, the great opportunities that we have to pray for one another. And so we just commit this time to you, as your word says in Proverbs 16:3, that as we commit our work to you, that you will give us success. And we want your success. And so guide our conversations today. Help us to gain wisdom and insight so that we might grow as leaders, but also that we might continue to improve in the local church. We do lift up those who are sick, and we ask that you would continue to heal and continue to meet the needs of their bodies, and the families give comfort and strength to them as they support their family members. We love you. We thank you for loving us. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So just a couple quick announcements. As you guys know, we are 1 week away from Idea Night. It is next Tuesday. Hopefully you already have your registration for you and your team and your staff to be able to go, as long as some of your lay leaders in the church. And you've got your location picked out and all of that. Really looking forward to it. And just stoked about everything that's going to come out of Idea Night this year, and the innovation and the ideas that we've passed around in those local contexts. This is our open house, so we do have some guests with us today. I was getting a bunch of messages like, hey, can I have the link? And people that are completely outside of our network wanting to jump in and see what this is all about. So that's really exciting. If you do see a familiar or an unfamiliar name or face, give them a shout out and say hi in the chat section. Also in the chat section, please do put whether you're new or returning or you're an official member, please put your real name, your church name, and city state so we can say hi and know who you are and where you are. It's always a lot of fun to see where everybody's at, and what the weather's like in your area and all of that, and how we can connect in different ways. Also coming up in just 4 very short months is the charter member only Idea Day in San Antonio, Texas. Let me just tell you guys, you're going to get an email this week, and I'm so excited for you to see what we have in store for this event, because it will be like no other Idea Day that we have done in the past. It is going to be first class, definitely a members feel, and we're just very excited. So keep an eye out for that email for all those details. And if you want to jump in on that, if you're not a member now, you can become a member. Idea Night next Tuesday is the last night to become a member. So we're very excited about that. And just remember, charter membership is unique. This year, 2021, is the charter year. It's when we first started the membership. So after 2021, there will be no more charter membership, like no more adding on. If you're a charter member, you are a charter member from now until forever. But the people who join in 2022, they will be official members, not charter members, because they did not join during the charter year. So it's a unique time to jump in and get be a part of something on the ground level. So if you're interested in that, just let us know and we'll get you connected. And that is all I have, Pastor Josh.
I'm not going to say it. I feel like I need to say it. I'm going to say it. Here's the thing. Being a charter member, super cool. Being an official member, kind of cool, but not that cool. I mean, what a downgrade, right? So if you have somebody, a friend on the fence, or maybe you're on the fence or joining the network, officially make sure that happens before December 31st, because the charter member year will be officially over. We're really excited about that. We're also very thrilled to have our friend, Thom Rainer, here with us today. We're really glad to have him. If you haven't picked up a copy of the Post-Quarantine Church, you need to do so as soon as possible. You can get it on Amazon or wherever you pick up your Christian resources. All of those Christian bookstores that are still open in your community, rush down there and get a copy of that as quickly as possible, because this little book is not only extremely helpful, it is extremely short. It's one of the shortest books I've read in a long time. And that's because it took Thom probably just a few, weeks or months to put this thing together. And it really has everything that you're looking for coming out of quarantine, out of this time of COVID. And I want to encourage you to pick up a copy. You can do that on Amazon. But really, today we have the author live and in person with us. He was with us in our Summit 2019 and has been with part of the network ever since. And so we're glad to have him here today. He's going to talk about the importance of innovation in the local church and in ministry as a whole, and how important it is to, with bravery and boldness, move forward in what God has called you to do. We're not breaking up into small groups today. We're actually going to be simply having our talk with Thom Rainer, and then we're going to do a live Q&A where all of the questions can just come in this roundtable, virtual roundtable opportunity. So we'll give you that opportunity at this time. If you're not familiar with the book, once again, Adam Bray in the chat section has given a link. You can pick that up. Thom, we're glad to have you here. Why don't you take it away?
Always glad to be with you and this network, Josh. We start talking about innovation in the church, and first thing I think that comes to mind for everyone, at least to some degree, is COVID. We've got to innovate because COVID's changing the world. We've got to innovate because there's a pandemic. We got to innovate because patterns are changing. Yeah, that's true. But here's the reality. COVID only accelerated and exacerbated what was already taking place. The need for innovation was strong, and certainly we've taken about 3 to 4 years of a leap forward in terms of all of our projections of what the change would be. And so right now we consider ourselves in 2024, 2025 in terms of our original projections. So that gives a greater sense of urgency. But I don't want you to think that COVID is the only reason for bravery and courage in this time. You know, the prototypical chapter, I think, for bravery and courage is Joshua 1. And it's not just Joshua 1, where Joshua's getting the people ready to go into the promised land. It's Deuteronomy 34, where Moses, or Joshua, speaking to the people about Moses, says these words, and they seem blunt, but he says, Moses, your servant, is dead. In other words, times have changed. We're not only getting out of the peninsula, going into the getting out of the wilderness, going into the promised land. We are doing so with a leader that you never had, and the leader that you've always had, that took you out of Egypt into the wilderness and now toward the promised land, is gone. And so it was a time of tumultuous change. But there was all kinds of innovation that's taking place, especially once you get into crossing the water into the promised land. I'm not going to exegete that. I would do a weak job of it. But simply to say that's a prototypical chapter. Joshua said, what did he say again and again in Joshua 1? Do not fear. Do not be discouraged. Do not be afraid. On and on in chapter 1. It's just full of that. And that's where we are right now. Certainly, our lives have been disrupted. Certainly, some lives have been taken. Certainly, there are people who are sick. Certainly, the economy has taken a 2x4 at times with this. I get this. But the necessity of innovation in the church has not changed. What we do at Church Answers, and by the way, visit us at Church Answers. This is my little plug, churchanswers.com. What we do at Church Answers, among other things like coaching and consulting and providing resources, is we measure change. I'm not going to bore you with all the data that we use to measure change, but we have these metrics that we use. Some of it is cultural change, some of it is economic change, some of it is political change, and a good bit of it is just change within the church. And as a consequence, we set up this scale that we're constantly updating and adapting that tells us where is the greatest change in the church needed right now at this very moment. The scale is a scale of 1 to 10, very simple. And anything above 7 is urgent. And then once you get in the 8 and the 9 range, it is highly urgent. And so I'm not going to tell you how we calculated the numbers, because that would take, most of an hour to do so, but simply going to give you the numbers for the necessity of change in 5 major areas. These areas are not comprehensive. There is a little bit of overlap in them. But when we talk to church leaders, we're saying, where do you need to be doing innovation? And these are the 5 areas that we have come up with. They're not in any particular order, but you will hear the numbers. And once again, remember, anything above 7 is urgent change. Anything above 8 is highly urgent change needed. So where's the necessity of innovation needing to take place in the church? Well, the first one is evangelistic innovation. Evangelistic innovation. We put this way on up there. It is the highest innovative issue that we think needs to be done, and it is a 9.8. We will not have anything in our scale of 1 to 10 that is higher than evangelistic innovation. Now, what do we mean by evangelistic innovation? Sometimes it means just doing it. Quite frankly, many churches have abandoned evangelistic intentionality. I do think many of the churches in Idea Network have done a much better job than the general populace of churches, but it is still highly needed. It takes 85 church members across the United States. Let me correct that, church members who are active. It takes 85 church members who are active a year to reach one person for Christ. That's the ratio where we are right now, 85 to 1. It hasn't been that long ago when it was a much better ratio of around 40 to 1. And while 40 to 1 is not good, it takes 40 people a year to reach one person for Christ in a church. 85 to 1 is abysmal. And so there is a necessity of evangelistic innovation. Going into the pandemic, we were recommending 4 times increase of resources toward evangelism in the church. And that's not just money. That is not just product resources. That is time as well. And what we have done is we have watched churches abandon evangelism, or at least minimize evangelism, will probably be a more palpable statement, and do a lot of other good things, but they're neglecting the great in order to do the good. There is not a good commission. There is a great commission. There's not a good commandment. There's a great commandment. And 1 Corinthians 13 is about the greatest of these, not another good thing. And so the neglect of the great is one of the greatest needs that we see in the church. What is the solution? Well, quite frankly, for many church leaders, I simply say, just do it. And I'm not trying to borrow from Nike. I'm just saying, just do it. It is better to try something evangelistic than to do nothing at all. And our evangelistic churches, particularly in North America, are woefully and abysmally unevangelistic. And the good thing about getting our churches turned in an evangelistic posture is it takes our focus off of those things that not only distract us, but discourage us and also drain us. And with the world that we're going through right now, getting beaten up on social media, the polarization that is taking place, my goodness, it is not only good to be obedient to the Great Commission, it is just healthy for leaders and for church members as well. We have the evangelistic pivot as a 9.8, and understand, I'm not giving you a hey, how to on this. I'm just giving you a do to on this. Just be evangelistic. We have resources for it, but I'm not going to pitch our resources as much as I'm just simply going to say, do something evangelistic and do it consistently, and make certain your church is at least aware that you have an evangelistic heart and a priority at the leadership level, because it will not happen unless it happens at the leadership level. You need to bring others on, but it begins with leadership. Evangelistic pivot, 9.8. The second one, in terms of innovation, is the discipleship innovation. We're putting that at 7.6, but I always have a question mark behind it, because not everyone, that's an overstatement. There are many different definitions or understandings about what discipleship is. For some, it's one-on-one. For some, it's groups. For some, it's reading the Bible. For some, it is prayer. For some, it has to happen in small numbers. For others, it can happen in the big worship event. And what is discipleship? Discipleship is becoming more like Christ, period. Just becoming more like Christ. And how do we help our people become more like Christ? The answers are pretty long. And there is not a wrong way to do it, but here is simply how we're looking at it. We're looking at discipleship from an assimilation point of view. That is not all of discipleship, but we're looking at discipleship from an assimilation point of view. How many people are becoming such good fruit-bearing members within the church that they are sticking, participating in ministry, participating in giving? How many are just demonstrating the fruit of the Spirit? How many of them are what you church leaders would point out as a really good church member, if I may use that phrase? And we could give all the issues that are in the discipleship innovation or the discipleship pivot, but we see about a 7.6. Now, if you say, Tom, do you have a recommendation? Yeah, I do. But it may not be the perfect recommendation for your church. If there's one thing that we're recommending in the discipleship innovation, it is an enormous emphasis on groups, small groups, community groups, life groups, Sunday school classes, whatever your nomenclature is. Let me just give you some correlated factor. Correlation does not indicate causation, but often it is. Here's one of them. A person in a group gives 7 times more than a person who goes to worship only per capita. So someone who is in a group per capita gives 7 times more than someone who is in worship only. You want to see your giving increase even more? Well, watch what happens when you have a strategy to move people to groups. A person who is in a group is more likely, 3 times more likely, to share his or her faith or invite someone to church than someone who is in worship only. I could go down a list of metrics, but if there's one thing that could help with the discipleship innovation, it is an increased emphasis on groups, because you're going to see more fruit-bearing disciples come forth with an emphasis of groups than any one pivot that I know. That does not suggest groups is the only form of discipleship. I understand that. But if you want one recommendation, that would be it. Discipleship innovation, 7.6. A third one is global mission innovation. We are monitoring the global scene of Christianity, and I'm tempted. Oh, I hate when I do share screen because I always mess it up. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to do a share screen. It's disabled. That's good. It's probably best. Somebody disabled me from doing share screen. Okay, I'm going to describe what would be on the screen. If you look at a map of the center of Christianity, and the center of Christianity is defined as the geographical populations of Christians is equal on all sides, northeast, south, and west. And so if you were to look at the center of Christianity from 33 AD to the present, you would watch it beginning in Jerusalem. You would watch it begin to move westward throughout Europe. And then around 1900, it would be somewhere in the Spain, Portugal area on Western Europe. And then if you were watching it according to the trends, if you were in 1900, you would say, oh, that's about to skip over the Atlantic Ocean and come into America, or North America. It didn't. Between 1900 and 1970, it took a sharp southeast turn, and it went to North Africa. And then by the time you get to 70 to 2020 AD, it has continued to move southeast, and now it is in North Central Africa. So what am I saying? It never made it to North America. Many pundits that are Western based or American based often see our country as the center of Christianity. And somebody would love to see Tom's graphic. Is there anybody that can help me? Oh, someone said you can share, Tom. Hang on. Let me see. All right, share. And let me see if I can find it. I always do this. I am terrible about it. Now you're probably seeing a book I'm writing, so you don't need to see that. Let's go here and let's go here. And are you seeing the map? I did it. I did it. I'm so proud. Now we'll see if I can get out of it. I know there's a stop share somewhere, but look at that map. Look at where Christianity was in 30 AD. Then it begins to move northwest, and then it moves west. And here it is in Madrid and the Portugal, Spain area. And then it takes from 1900 to 1970 a sharp southeast turn, and then even more so into 2000, and then projected into 2100 AD. So you can see what has happened here. Now, here's the reality, folks. We are not treating our global mission strategy often as a strategy. And I'm not suggesting that our funding for missions should just go here, but I am suggesting that we should have an awareness of where the receptivity to the gospel is. And in just 5 years, from now, 6 of the top populated Christian countries are going to be in Africa. Nigeria, in about 15 years, will have the greatest population of Africa, of Christians, I should say, in the world. Uganda, on the other side of Africa, will as well. And it is really moving in that direction. So my point in all of this is simply Christianity is changing. God is doing something in the African area. What is our global mission strategy for this? Church Answers responded, and we have opened Church Answers Nigeria. We just said we're going to open an office in Nigeria. And we got Nia Dunamont to be our Nigerian director. And we are just going to see what we can do to be a resource for churches in Nigeria, because that's where it is moving. That is where it's moving. Global Mission Pivot, we see the need at an 8.8. It's a high need for innovation, Many of us, whether, and for those, I know most of you are not denominational, most of you are non-denom, independent, and part of the network, IDEA network. But if you're in a denomination, we often have not, denominations have not reviewed global strategies as well as they should, and individual churches are not always reviewing global strategies as well. Global Mission Pivot 8.8. The fourth one is a facility pivot, 7.2. 7.2. Just a few things that are happening. Worship centers or sanctuaries, whatever you call them, are getting smaller. Some of it has to do with attendance decreasing before COVID, but some of it also has something to do with that is going, more and more people are more likely to go to a smaller worship gathering than a larger worship gathering. And so larger churches, the mega churches in North America would not have grown the past 20 years had they stayed at one site. It was only because of the multi-site movement that they grew, but we're seeing that type of innovation take place at smaller churches as well. In fact, I know of a church averaging 150 in attendance that has 3 sites, total attendance of 150. And from my perspective, they're all healthy. So one of the things that is happening with facilities is worship centers are getting smaller. Another thing that is happening in facilities are churches are more likely to share their facilities with another church, or eventually another site within their own church, within their own building. And so you might have an ethnic church that meets on Sunday afternoon that you allow it to come in for a while, and then you maybe bring it into your church facility, but the whole, your church itself. But the whole point is facility needs are decreasing. Really, another thing that is happening on the facility innovation is that more and more churches are being restricted by governmental authorities in zoning and acquisition and providing land, etc. So there's need for innovation there as well. So I could go on and on that, but we see the facility innovation at about a 7.2. The last one, and I want to be cognizant of our time. I've probably taken too many minutes, but I'm going to certainly end it by 1:30. I would call it the personnel pivot or the personnel innovation, and I would put that at an 8.3. And I want to say I would put it at 8.3. The data that we're using to talk about necessary change, we put at a 8.3. We're seeing a massive movement of personnel for church pastors and staff move to bivocational, and co-vocational. We define bivocational as someone who is in a certain position because of budgetary constraints of the church. We define co-vocational as someone who elects to have one foot in the marketplace and one foot in the church, the vocational church. That's just the desire of that person. If you follow Church Answers at all, you will see a lot more information about bivocational and co-vocational. We're a little bit ahead of the curve, but we're trying to get the word out, if you will. If you need to start training your bivo, you need to start training your covo. And again, forgive me about talking about Church Answers, but I just want to tell you one way that we have responded to this. We are realizing that more and more training is needed for these bivo covo, among others as well, that it's just not practical for them to pay or to get college or seminary education, Bible college particularly, or seminary education in particular. And so we are watching Google and other major corporations move to certificates or diplomas, whatever you want to call them, which are non-degree programs that are quicker, much more affordable. And so we will be announcing in July of 2022, Church Answers University, which is a complete training. And to call it the equivalent of a degree would be an overstatement, very similar to a degree, but the entire cost of it is for books, all your courses, a minimum of 10 courses. The entire cost of it is $1,900. And so we're looking at this being highly affordable. We mentioned this and we began to get scholarship funds for African students who don't even have the $1,900. And so we think that things like Church Answers University is going to answer some of the needs of Bivo, Covo, but even beyond is hiring as many people with certifications as there are with degrees now. We think that movement is going to take place increasingly in the church world as well. Personnel pivot, 8.3, the personnel innovation. That's the 5 that I wanted to focus on. I could do a lot more, but I need to be cognizant of our time and the fact that you may want to have some questions or that you think I'm incredibly boring and you just want to sign off and go eat. So whichever the possibility is, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to turn it back over to our Idea Network leaders and we'll see what kind of questions you may have.
All right. We don't want you to be shy and we don't want to waste the time as much as possible. So we have about 32 minutes to engage with Thom. I'd love if somebody had a follow-up question as it relates first, and that is these 5 areas of innovation. Does anybody want to begin by saying, hey, you know what, Thom, I have a question about one of these 5 areas or something about innovation that was in the discussion? Just raise your hand and we'll go ahead and point you out. Unmute yourself and go for it. To be the first one is always tough. There we go, James.
Oh, hello. Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Question. In regards to evangelism, are you seeing some methods like door-to-door becoming less effective as opposed to gathering type events?
I am finding we are finding that events that have an invitation element to them are highly effective. But we're also finding a form of door-to-door where you're actually not knocking that is highly effective as well. And I'll give you 2 examples. One, if we can just get our church members inviting on a regular basis, going in front of that home and praying for it and just leaving a door hanger on the door to say, we prayed for you, contact us if you need us for anything, and there's address and text and email address that is there. We're seeing high effectiveness, not only in seeing people come into the, but in pre-evangelism as well.
Very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, James, for that question. Is there a follow-up from you, James?
No,
Nope.
that's good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. Anybody else as it relates to either evangelism, discipleship, global mission, facility, or personnel? Yeah, Mike.
I had a question about reduction in personnel. So a couple of my guys are here, so I'm not talking about you, but
Sure you're
actually
not.
moving people from full-time to part-time. I know we're typically thinking if you're starting from a church plant or a beginning, it's obviously a little easier to move in that direction than when you're in a full-time staff trying to move backwards from that. Just thoughts on that, suggestions?
We've worked with several churches, Mike, that have, to use your words, moved backwards, and they thought they moved, and they feel like it is a move forward. And the process has been very simple. When there is an opening, full-time person, in a best case scenario, leaves voluntarily, goes to another church, retires, one of those good exits instead of a bad exit, to rethink once that vacancy occurs, instead of filling it with the same thing, the same way we've always done it. Not just think part-time, but think in a very critical and innovative way, what do we really need? I'll give you an example of a church in Florida that had someone leave that was full-time. They replaced that person with 10 positions. And the 10 positions were primarily filled with laypersons within the church who did get a stipend, but the totality of the 10 was not even as much as the one. So obviously it was a minor stipend position to these 10, and it actually became revolution together going outside of COVID. So they had someone that was just nothing but looking after senior, but they actually moved a young person into that. They had one person who focused on groups for young adults, another one who focused on for middle, and then for older. And it was revolutionary because they focused upon areas where they saw not only the church need, but the community need. So if I'm moving toward this Vivo Covo movement, I'm not thinking of downsizing and cutting pay. That may be necessary from a budgetary point of view. I'm thinking of getting innovative when the opportunity arises. And we always think that turnover is not going to happen, and it usually happens a lot faster, voluntary turnover, than we think.
Thank you very much for sharing that. One of the things that Tom and Sam shared with us when they came out and did an evaluation for our church was just that point. And they looked at our budget and they saw a salary, a certain amount of money that we had designated toward a hire of a new person. And they said, why don't you take that money, divide it into 5 different segments and hire 5 different part-time people to take those 5 different positions or 5 different responsibilities. That's exactly what we did. We basically took one full-time staff person who would have been complaining about, I've got 5 different jobs around here. And we gave it to 5 really grateful people in our church who are loving it, and they brought them onto full time. And now that department is really blowing up. So context or Dennis. Dennis is in a coffee shop right now and does not want to go unmute because it would be too loud with the sound of espresso. But Dennis asks this question, Tom, what advice would you give in regards to building a new church building with the facility innovation in mind? Should this take place? When should this be thinking?
Again, go back to the issue of thinking that you should be filling up a worship center by the time it's complete. And filling up maybe 60% capacity in a post-COVID world or a post-quarantine world, but whatever you think is full, you should not think about we're going to have room to grow in the worship service. You should think we should fill it up immediately and that then we should go to multiple services. Again, your ecclesiology may be a little bit different and you may feel like you don't want to do anything other than Sunday, but the fastest growing worship service time right now is on Thursday night. And the reason that is, we think, is a cultural phenomenon that people basically they go to the Thursday night service and then take long weekends, particularly on holiday weekends when there's a Monday holiday. So one of the first things that you are doing is you should absolutely think of a smaller worship center. Now I'm going to say this because I don't know who you think for a builder, a church builder, but when I recommend church builders to church leaders, I'm looking for someone who has three elements. One is architectural, two is building. Those are usually coupled together in what is called design build, and then a third is consulting. I want to make sure that the builder is also a consultant and understands how to understand the community, understand the church. And so when we make recommendations for church builders, we say, find someone who understands this innovative edge where you're not just telling them what to do, they're helping you to understand what to do as well. Next thing I would do is just one final, is I would make certain that I've gotten good demographics and psychographics on my community, because that can dictate what the building looks like. I keep saying I'm not going to talk about my resources, but I guess we will here. We have one at church and it's called Know Your Community. It's about a 60-page report with about 6 pages of infographics that you to know your community from a psychographic and the latest 2020 data and updated it for 20. I'm building the needs of the community.
Fantastic.
Hey,
Tom,
quick question with regards to your second thought on discipleship and your small groups, people are taking more ownership in every area of the ministry. I would like to know maybe how does that correlate with volunteerism, because we kind of tie that in with the evangelism, or I'm sorry, with the discipleship, that the more deeply serving they are is also going to correlate to deeper ownership.
Tommy, let me get a specific question.
So rephrasing that maybe is volunteerism with a rating, or is it tied into discipleship?
Currently, it is embedded within several of them, as a matter of fact. And because I think I posted Church Answers yesterday that we talked about, I think it's 7 questions pastors are asking that they were not asking 5 years ago. What do we do about volunteers? It has given us the reality that we're probably going to have to pull out a separate, have it separate. We nail not necessarily the missions in that direction.
very good. Tommy, do you have a follow-up?
Volunteerism as well. In other words, as we move them through discipleship, the final step of our discipleship process is serving. And then we've found if we can move people all the way through that process and not only get in a small group for ongoing discipleship, but also tie them into an area of service, they're going to on missions within and global as well. It kind of impacts, like you said, Dr. Rainer,
It
many
does.
areas.
And that's why I think it's so important. It may need to stand out on itself, what we're thinking. And above all, thank you for telling us that you're on that pathway ahead of us as well.
David Church has a question.
By the way, I think it's taken care of now. We were having some feedback from the window with an asterisk on it. Just wanted to let you know to mute that. So it looks like it's taken care of. All right.
Fantastic. David Church.
Yeah, I have a question about facilities. I have a friend of mine who just started a church, and they're right now, I think they're doing it out of church place. Literally what they do is they notify the community, hey, see where we're meeting, fix that kind of model working well, because, you know, we work in an increasingly mobile society who doesn't always like to tie down to one place, locations, but mobile, basically.
Many are mobile, but not weekly mobile. The situation that you described would be an outlier. And it presumes that people are keeping up with the church. And so somebody has to go to the website, or they have to be on an email list to know. And then, you know, if you're looking at second time guests, third time guests, and they're not keeping up with the church, they don't know where the place is going to be. I understand that it is a good stewardship possibility, but I would, off the cuff, since I've never addressed this issue before about weekly mobility, I would think that it would present some barriers that and some friction that you may not need to have there. But in terms of mobility, most new churches have to be mobile. One thing that has really hurt during the pandemic is those who are in schools, and many schools have just finally said, we just can't have guests here, our churches here. And it's not necessarily a political issue, it's just much as the reality of what they're having to deal with COVID. Some churches were in governmental buildings, and again, that's become an issue. The churches, if you're from California, I have dealt with a lot of how about 7 or 8? I've dealt with 7 or 8 churches in California who are in non-owned facilities, and many of those are being challenged right now just because whether it's a school or government building or even an office building, they're having trouble returning. So those are some of the things that we're seeing, but mobility is going to be a factor. Leasing is going to be a greater challenge. And that's why we're recommending that churches that have good campuses think about sharing those campuses.
So very good. And by the way, that can work out well if you do have a campus and consider sharing that campus. That's worked out really well for us. We have as was mentioned before by Thom, a ethnic church that was wanting and needing a facility, a Korean campus, a Korean church. Our the doctrines aligned up so well, we decided to eventually merge. Now they're part of the Southern Hills network of churches here in Las Vegas. On that further, contact me, we'll talk. All right, next question. I'm waiting for a hand. Justin went like this, and that's really rude. You know you did that on purpose. You're scratching your head, and I know you're messing with me. That's what it is. We're joined by Joe Henkel, by the way, today, Hollywood star. From a lot of us know him for many, many years, part of the network, and now is a live YouTube interviewer. How are you doing, Joe? Good to see you, buddy. All right, next question. Yeah, Bob Perry.
Yeah, maybe circle back to the question about facilities and building. And I think, Josh, you even mentioned that you guys are going to be getting into a building program or such last week. You mentioned that. But we are holding 2 services on Sunday morning already. So the multi-service type thing. We're at the point where we are considering adding on to be able to give more room. I guess falling short of totally revamping our complete service schedule and such on Sundays, that seems to me to be the only way that we can really make room for folks. Thom, what would you suggest in that way? With what you're seeing, is an expansion a bad idea? And would it be better to go with add another service, maybe on a different day even? Or in certain contexts, do you feel that addition to a facility is still viable in this day?
I would never say that building a larger facility is a bad idea. Ultimately, everything is contextual. And for me to speak from Franklin, Tennessee, near Nashville, about what is a good idea versus a bad idea is a bit presumptuous. I would say this to most churches: check the other options first. And the other options would be new services, whether it's in the Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, or the other day category. I was working with one pastor. He tried it, but it was an established church where he met so much resistance that they said, "We got boatloads of cash. We want to expand our worship center." And so he yielded to that. It was a contextual issue. It was not a hill worth dying on, because they did not have to go into debt to fund it. But I would say check the multi options first to see what is there. Hear this very clearly. Church growth in North America, if it is occurring horizontally and not vertically. I want to say that once again. Church growth in North America, if it is occurring, is largely occurring horizontally and not vertically. Always outliers, you may be one of them. And what I mean by that, it goes back to the statement I made about mega churches, and it's not all about mega churches, but the statement I made is there would not have been mega church growth over the last decade or so had they not grown horizontally with new campuses or new venues, which would mean meeting sometime other than Sunday morning. So all other things being equal, I would check the multi-option first, but I would never say never that you shouldn't expand, because there will be cases where you might need to.
Thom speaks of multi-options. We're talking about, first of all, multi-services, which means you're going to be adding on your Sunday; multi-day, which means you're going to be adding another day of the week; multi-venue, which means you're going to allow another church to meet in your church, perhaps another different speaking language; and then multi-site, another location outside that you might be able to stream to or have a pastor set up. So those are the 4 multi-options. Beyond that, when you get to a place where all 4 of those are at capacity, as much as you believe they could be, building larger, that's when we decided, okay, we're doing all of those things to our best of our ability. We really have to now launch our second phase of our Blue Diamond campus that will launch in January and eventually be done in January 24. So, Trevor, it looks like you have a question for Thom.
Yes. Are there any churches or ministries that are really just modeling or doing healthy, innovative evangelism that you would say, hey, just kind of keep your eye to this, look at some of the decisions they're making, as things that they're doing? Got anybody like that we can just keep our eyes on?
I would have pointed to the bridge in the Nashville area. They lost their pastor, and it seems like that they have taken a big drop since then, but they were doing a lot of innovative things. You could probably go back and look at some of the on their website. I don't know their URL, but just look up the bridge. It's actually in Spring Hill, Tennessee, not in Nashville. It's right out. It's right outside that. I'm trying to think. I have seen some from a baptism point of view. I've seen some heavy numbers of baptisms in churches recently. I need to think about which of those, and then I'm looking at my church. My church runs 190. My son is the pastor, but we're looking at a conversion growth of about 30 or 40 people this year. So it's a good ratio. His is not innovation. His is persistence, and we're keeping the outward focus before us. So you've got Station Hill. You got the church at Spring Hill. You've got the bridge also in that area, and I'll try to look for some established churches that are really doing well in baptisms. particularly during COVID, because that's what I'd like to give you.
Dr. Rainer, are you thinking of Long Hollow possibly, Rob Galati? No.
Yeah, Galati. Robbie Galati at Long Hollow. That is a great one. It is a mega church. It is in Hendersonville, Tennessee. It is a mega church, but it's hundreds upon hundreds of conversions. So that is a very good example.
Very good. Another question for Thom before we go. Yeah, Philip.
As I've looked over the list of the different areas of innovation that you talked about today, one that I'm not hearing questions about has to do with discipleship. Maybe I missed it, but discipleship specifically. Any practical ideas for discipleship that you've found are being effective in helping people to grow in Christ likeness?
I had discipleship as my second one, and it was at a 7.6. And what I mentioned was it's the definition of discipleship determines the process of discipleship. And so I am still a major advocate of the small group, the community group, the Sunday school class, and emphasis upon that. A lot of intentionality there, not just having them exist, but a lot of intentionality about nurturing them, creating new groups. To me, that is where I've seen a lot of the discipleship metrics grow. But I will say this. We partnered recently with the organization that's been around a half a century called Walk Through the Bible. And Walk Through the Bible is basically a presentation that lasts about 2.5 hours for your church that gets people in the Word. It helps them to understand the big picture of Scripture, the macro picture, and it encourages them to get in the Word. They have some metrics that indicate I shouldn't say just, but getting people into daily Bible reading has been extremely effective in discipleship. So I want to follow the studies of Walk Through the Bible. It's not a self-serving study. They're good people that are really convicted and convinced that daily Bible reading is a major metric for discipleship. And I'm a big advocate of the groups as well. That's why I put it as a 7.6. That's pretty high.
Thank you.
I have a question that came in from someone else who cannot speak out loud right now from where they're sitting. I'm also in a crowded area, they say. I have a question. What are some trends that Dr. Rainer has seen in the trends as it relates to the local church here in the United States and worldwide evangelism or missions?
Well, quite frankly, North America is statistically moving toward evangelism anemia. I'm hesitant to put it at graveyard status, but it is moving the direction that much of Western Europe did for the 20th century. The numbers are matching it fairly closely. I don't take that as a hopeless situation. I just take it as a reality that the culture in which we are is increasingly difficult to reach. And churches, as a rule, are reverting on the ways we've always done things. And the way we've always done things are not going to work and are not working in this current environment. As I indicated, the African continent is exploding with evangelistic growth, even why the Muslim growth is high as well. We're keeping our eyes on that. I mentioned Church Answers has already moved to an office in Nigeria in order to try to understand and to reach with someone who is contextual there. Continue to watch the underground church in China. It was having great growth. It's not quite as much, at least from what we can tell. But another surprise is some pockets in Europe are beginning to show some health as well. I would not identify any one country at this point, but if you look at particularly Western Europe as a single geographic area, which I know is wrong, we're beginning to see some spikes there that are fascinating, not enough to call a trend, but even more so than we're seeing in North America. The United States and Canada are two of the most struggling areas.
We have another question here from Calvin Hauser. Calvin.
Hey, Tom, thanks for the content today. It's been really good. I'm actually a foreign missionary to the Philippines, so you're speaking my language when it comes to missions. And I wanted to follow up that last question. What are some ways that we as the church, or even as a missionary sent out of one of the Idea Network churches personally, what are some creative ways that we can engage in this growth in North Africa, in the Middle East? Other than, I mean, I know the conventional way would be to send a missionary, but what are some other creative ways you're seeing churches get involved, even in places that are restricted access today?
Of course, and as a missionary, you would understand my response. And my response is be as indigenous and as contextual as you can be. I am not funding missionaries to Nigeria. I'm funding a Nigerian to reach Nigeria. He, beginning with Negi Dunamont and his leadership at Church Answers Nigeria, we said we cannot go in and presume a Western mindset and reach this area. So one of the first things that you would ask is, how can we support the indigenous work that is there, the contextual work is there, as well as maybe send someone from a Western geographical position for a season, but with I would call it the Pauline position of equipping and then moving on. So the more the indigenous population grabs hold of leadership in the church, the more likely, all things being equal, that we're going to see a movement in those areas.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Calvin, for that question. Quick, another follow-up with you, Calvin. Somebody just asked, how is the Philippines doing? We read about a recent spike as it relates to COVID. Are you doing well? How's the people?
Yeah, there has been a recent spike. Pray for the churches there. We've had 6 different pastors over the past 2 months that are affiliated with our ministry over there that have passed away. And so it's hitting way closer to home right now. So keep praying for the churches there. There has been a spike, which has led to more lockdowns as well. So churches are just, we have to be more innovative than we ever have been. And so these things that even Tom, you've been talking about are helpful for us, because one thing that I've been pointing out to a lot of people, I just had lunch with someone today, is that through the lockdowns and churches being restricted, it's forced us back into the small group model to rely way more on that through the Zooms and online chats that we're doing. And so we're seeing the community aspect of our ministry grow through these lockdowns. Even though we can't meet face to face, in many instances, we're able to build that community in a deeper way through conversations that sadly, in a conventional Sunday church setting, people can somehow avoid. But when you're stuck on a Zoom camera, you got to talk, especially if you're in a small group. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Pray for the church. We're still trying to get back there right now due to the restrictions and some visa issues on our end. But yeah, keep praying for the Philippines.
I absolutely love the positive perspective every time I've had a chance to talk with Calvin and so many of the missionaries that are related to the Idea Network. The spirit of positivity continues to pervade in each and every one of these sessions. So we are grateful for that. Thank you, Calvin. Thank you, Tom, for joining us for this awesome roundtable conversation and for all that you do for the network as it relates to podcast interviews that we do, and being part of Idea Days and Idea Summits in the past and Idea Nights. We are grateful for that. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with you. Speaking of Idea Night, next Tuesday is our annual Idea Night all over the country. And if you don't have a location that you're going to, we want to encourage you to go online and sign up right away and be supportive of that exciting night. Bring a friend, call that pastor that you've been interested in developing a relationship with, or call that pastor that you don't like and invite them to come. Maybe you can have them put a tack and make them sit on it, something like that. But bring a pastor, bring a friend, bring some ministry leaders, your deacons. Have a good opportunity of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't mean deacons, I mean bring your deacon and then go to an Idea Day. Spend a little time together. It'll be a great opportunity. Next week, our virtual roundtables do continue. Yes, that's right. The podcast does drop every Tuesday, as well as the virtual roundtables every Tuesday, as well as Idea Days. Nights and summits are normally on a Tuesday. Tuesday is the day that Idea Network owns. And next Tuesday, we continue with our series during the month of September on virtual roundtable discussions. And next week, we have with us Alan Parr. Many of you know Alan Parr, YouTube sensation with nearly 1 million followers, who are subscribers, I should say. Who is going to be talking with us about how to teach small group to go deeper in Bible study. Alan's a fantastic follow on YouTube. You're going to enjoy his content. If you haven't, we want to turn you on to Alan. Alan loves our network, and we love Alan. He's going to be here live interacting with us the same way Thom was today. The week after that, womp, womp, womp. Josh Tice, that's me, how to set and achieve ministry goals. So you're stuck with me because we could not book anybody cool. But we are going to be talking about how you can actually establish goals. We're going to talk specifically about quarterly goals. How do you take annual goals? How do we take an annual plan? How do we say, okay, we're going into this year, but what do I want to accomplish this winter? What do I want to accomplish this spring? What do I want to accomplish this fall? And dividing your life up into these separate quarters, 3 months at a time, to really, truly focus with a singularity on 1 or 2 goals in a specific time. We're going to talk about that and how you can do that for yourself, as well as your broader staff and team, even deacons. It's going to be a great conversation. We look forward to that next week. Cognizant of your time, so thank you so much. We're out.